In this video, I will give a brief overview about what's new in the United Bible Society's Greek New Testament. This is the 6th edition, published at the end of 2025. That's 11 years after the previous edition, the UBS5. One of the things you'll notice probably right away, one of the biggest changes, is the order of books in the edition. The sequence of books in previous UBS editions was the same as in most English translations. In this new edition, the Catholic letters have been placed directly after Acts instead of Paul's letters. Hebrews is found after 2 Thessalonians in the edition, whereas before it was placed after Philemon. This sequence reflects an early and predominant Greek tradition, which actually agrees with Athanasius' Festal letter of 367, which is one of the earliest accounts we have of the New Testament canon. Westcott and Hort and Tischendorf also have this order. The UBS6 isn't the first critical edition in recent years to depart from the typical order of books. In the Tyndale House Greek New Testament, the Catholic letters also follow Acts, but they place Hebrews right before Revelation. For most of us, this new order, or rather very old order in the UBS6, will certainly take some getting used to. It might be good to start training with some Bible drills with this edition and see how it goes. The second major change that we've never seen before in the Nestle edition or UBS6 edition is that a number of missing verses have been put back into the Greek text. The editors have put verses or parts of verses that have been held to be inauthentic into the main text. In the previous editions, these were relegated to the apparatus, except for the ending of Mark in the Pericope Adulterae in John, and 2 other passages in Luke. In the UBS6, these missing verses are in double brackets. This is meant to show that they are part of a later tradition and not part of the initial text. You can see a list of these in the introduction, the UBS6, on pages 11 and 12. While adding these verses to the text is definitely a break with the UBS tradition, their presence may be helpful for users who weren't aware these passages are not original. It can also help readers place these verses in context, and the apparatus makes it easier to understand what manuscript evidence does or does not support them. Having these verses in the upper text, however, may unintentionally give them more authority, but since the ending of Mark and Pericope Adulterae were already given in double brackets, including these and other verses is actually consistent with the rest of the edition. You may notice that some of these double bracketed verses are very familiar, like the confession of faith in the story about Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch that says, "If you believe with your whole heart, you may be baptized." And he replied, "I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God." So that brings us to a potential paradox in the edition. While the sequence of books in the UBS6 has been reordered to reflect an earlier Greek tradition, it could be argued that placing these verses back into the main text, albeit with double brackets, takes the text more towards reflecting a later tradition. I'd be interested to hear how other users of the edition find both of these major changes. Other changes in the edition come from adopting the ongoing results of the ECM. The UBS6 took over the Greek text of 3 ECM volumes, Mark, Acts, and Revelation, and the selection of witnesses in the apparatus has also been updated based on these. The previous edition already had the text of the ECM Catholic letters, so that stayed the same. In the back, you can find a list of all textual changes in the 6th edition. There are 167 changes listed, nearly half of which are in Revelation. As the appendix indicates, these will also be the changes adopted in the 29th edition of the Nestle Aland. ECM Matthew hasn't been incorporated in the UBS6, and it won't be in the NA29 either because it's still in progress. Between the UBS 4th edition and the UBS 6th edition, there are about 200 textual changes. Since this covers Mark, Acts, Catholic letters, and Revelation, this means about 1/3 of the text of the New Testament has been revised now on the basis of the ECM. And for those who are familiar with the ECM, you know there are also split guiding lines, which is when the editors leave a textual decision open. This is represented in the UBS6 by placing a diamond in the text and in the apparatus by the corresponding variant. This diamond was incorporated in the last UBS edition in the Catholic letters, but has now been utilized for Mark, Acts, and Revelation. It's added only where the UBS has an apparatus. So for example, in Mark 4:3, there's a split line in ECM, but there's no diamond in the UBS because there's no apparatus entry. But Mark 4:8 does have an apparatus entry and is a split line in the ECM, so there is a diamond for that. The whole framework of this edition has been significantly revised. In addition to incorporating all relevant changes from the ECM, the editors have sought to refine the whole conceptual approach of the edition. Because there's been a general decline in fluency in ancient languages, like Greek, and less emphasis on textual criticism today, the focus in this edition has shifted towards presenting the most relevant information as clearly as possible. So the selection of apparatus units and the witnesses cited have been carefully reconsidered. Rather than aiming to present extensive amounts of evidence like previous UBS editions, the UBS6 adopts a more streamlined approach. To further enhance usability, the apparatus has been standardized across the entire edition. There are fewer one-off or inconsistently cited witnesses and greater consistency in the attestation of witnesses throughout. The number of apparatus units has been reduced substantially. The UBS4 had 1,438 variant units. The UBS5 added 4 units and removed 11, while the UBS6 now includes 1,017 units. So this is a reduction of over 400 units from the previous edition. Page 12 of the introduction outlines how the editors determined whether to include an apparatus unit. They had 3 criteria related to the Greek text itself. They asked, does the variant affect translation? Does it have a bearing on exegesis? Does the majority reading differ significantly from the editorial text? And regarding the attestation of a variant, they asked whether it is useful for illuminating the transmission of the text. Another notable change concerns the structure of the apparatuses. This is the UBS5 here. It had 3 separate apparatuses, one for textual variants, one for punctuation, and one for biblical references. Here's the UBS6. It has only one apparatus, which is for the variants. References to other biblical passages are now relocated to the margins, and the apparatus of punctuation has been removed altogether. So, for example, you can see references are in the margin. The ratings assigned to variants have also been revised where necessary. For example, in the UBS5, you can see this passage here got an A rating, which means the editors are certain about the text. And in UBS6, it was downgraded to a B, which means the editors are fairly certain about the text. There are also a few other interesting points to note. The introduction has been completely rewritten. The older prefaces have been removed, leaving only the UBS6 preface. In the introduction, there's an image of each category of manuscript included. For example, there's P46 to represent the papyri, Codex Vaticanus to represent the majuscules, and Minuscule 1, which is famous for being used by Erasmus, to represent the minuscules. There's no longer lectionaries included in the edition, only references to lect that were introduced in the 4th edition of the UBS. Also, the English headings have been revised. Many have stayed the same, but like John 19 and 20 have been slightly changed, and so have Romans 1:18 and 3:9. For example, you can see Romans 1:18 says the guilt of humankind, and in the 5th edition, it says the guilt of mankind. And for those not wanting to go into detail about the manuscript tradition, there's a handy reader's edition, just like there was for the UBS5, where parsing and glosses of Greek words that occur less than 30 times in the New Testament are given at the bottom of the page. The Reader's Edition has all the new textual changes as well, so that might be a great option for some. Another particularly valuable aid for understanding the textual decisions and evidence behind the UBS6 apparatus is the new textual commentary by one of the editors, Hugh Houghton. What really stands out in Houghton's work is that it's not just a revision of Metzger's commentary, like Omenson's was. It's an independent, thoroughly new contribution. He goes back to the manuscript evidence itself, evaluates the attestations carefully, and builds his arguments from there, while also drawing on a broad range of current scholarship. So, returning to the UBS6, there's no doubt that this edition has been streamlined to be less daunting and more useful for those beginning their engagement with the Greek New Testament and its textual history. On a personal note, my first Greek New Testament was the 4th edition of the UBS. At that time, I found it overwhelming due to the density of information apparatus, and I know I would have certainly benefited from a similar design to the UBS6. While the UBS6 is Particularly well suited for beginners, the edition is still really valuable for translators, pastors, theologians, and anyone who wants to engage the text of the New Testament on a deeper level. So, in closing, the editors and all those involved deserve a big congratulations for the completion of this milestone edition. The 6th edition is a significant achievement, many years in the making, and I hope others will enjoy using it as a resource for studying the text of the New Testament.